It wasn't something I had planned, it just kind of happened. Like many others, I needed some extra cash during the holidays, and Target seemed like a decent option. I'd never even shopped there before, so walking in as an employee felt a little ironic. What I didn't know was how drastically this job would impact me. I thought it'd just be about stocking shelves and earning a paycheck. Instead, it became a story I'll never forget. A story about fear, instincts, and survival. I started the job during the rush of the holiday season. My shift began at 4 a.m., and our team of 4 or 5 would unload shipments, organize stock, and prep the store before the shopping chaos began. The job wasn't complicated, but the hours were grueling. The store had a back room where we stored shipments, but it wasn't big enough to handle the holiday overflow. That's where the overflow room came in, a small, oddly placed room tucked away in a corner of the store. It felt more like a forgotten office than a storage area. One morning I was assigned to work in the overflow room with a coworker I didn't know well. Let's call him David. He was quiet with a demeanor that was hard to pin down, aloof yet jittery. David's behavior stood out from the start. He frequently left the store after getting text messages, disappearing for a few minutes before returning like nothing had happened. No one seemed to care, so I brushed it off too. But one morning, while we were working together, things took a strange turn. David got one of his usual texts and muttered something about stepping out. As he rushed off, a small plastic bag fell from his pocket. Curious, I picked it up. It was a Ziploc bag with dried herbs, or so I thought. My mind, still foggy from the early hour, assumed he was into gardening. When David returned, I casually pointed to the bag. "Hey, you dropped your herbs?" He froze. His eyes darted to the bag, then to me, and his expression darkened. "You think this is funny?" he snapped, his voice low and menacing. That's when it clicked. These weren't herbs, and David wasn't a gardener. Leaning closer, he whispered, "If you tell anyone about this, I'll kill you." I froze. His words weren't a joke. They were a threat. My heart pounded as I nodded, too scared to respond. After that encounter, I couldn't shake the unease. I started paying more attention to David. It didn't take long to realize he wasn't just carrying drugs. He was likely using them too. Some days, he seemed completely out of it, mumbling to himself or staring off into space. Other days, he'd snap over the smallest things. Once, he screamed at his shoelaces for coming undone. Another time, he threw a box across the room because it was in the way. The realization hit me hard. I was working alongside someone dangerous. Outside of work, I tried to live normally. I went running in the park near my house to clear my mind. One afternoon, during a run, I spotted David sitting on a bench. He wasn't just sitting there, he was watching me. Our eyes met and my stomach churned. How long had he been following me? What did he want? I pretended not to notice and kept running, but the encounter left me rattled. I started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. A few weeks later, I arrived at work an hour early, around 3 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, and I parked far from the store to leave space for customers. As I sat in my car listening to a podcast, headlights appeared behind me. I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. The car parked directly behind mine, its high beams flooding my car with light. It was David. My hands trembled as I turned off my car and opened the door. The moment I stepped out, I heard his engine rev. He was coming for me. Panic surged through me as I sprinted toward the store. The sound of tires screeching behind me was deafening. I veered toward a line of trees in the parking lot, using them as cover. His car couldn't follow, and I used the opportunity to dash toward the employee entrance. I pounded on the door, screaming for help. Thankfully, my manager was inside. She let me in, locked the door, and called the police. When the police arrived, David was gone. They searched his file only to discover that the address he'd provided was fake. Target's seasonal hiring process hadn't caught the red flag, a mistake that could have cost me my life. I quit the next day. Staying wasn't worth the risk. Looking back, I often wonder why I didn't act sooner. Why didn't I report David when I found the bag? Why did I let fear keep me silent? The truth is, I didn't want to believe I was in danger. I wanted to assume the best in people, even when the signs pointed to the worst. This experience taught me some hard lessons. I learned to trust my instincts and to prioritize my safety over everything else. I also learned that fear, while paralyzing, can be a powerful motivator. It took months to shake the fear David had instilled in me. I stopped running at the park and avoided going out alone. Gradually, I started reclaiming my life. Today I'm more cautious but also more resilient. I know now that it's okay to speak up, to ask for help, and to take action when something feels wrong. This story isn't just about what happened to me, it's about survival and growth. It's about facing fear head-on and coming out stronger on the other side. Would I ever take a seasonal job again? Probably not, but I'm grateful for the lessons this experience taught me. The smell of freshly brewed coffee used to comfort me. Now it just marked the start of another exhausting day at Starbucks. The fact that it was inside a Target helped a little. There were always interesting people wandering in, browsing for something they didn't need. But for me, it was just another reminder of how stuck I felt. "Order for Katie," I called out, sliding a caramel macchiato onto the counter. "Sarah, it's your break," Erica, my manager, said. "Go recharge for a bit." I nodded, slipping off my apron. "Thanks." The break room felt too small, too suffocating, so I headed out back. I leaned against the cold brick wall and let the tears fall. This was becoming a pattern. Crying during my breaks, hiding from coworkers, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. "Rough day?" A voice startled me. I turned quickly, brushing the tears away. A guy was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. He had shaggy brown hair and a crooked smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, something like that," I muttered, embarrassed. He stepped closer, keeping his tone light. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps." "I'm fine," I lied. He didn't push. "All right, but if you ever need someone to vent to, I'm around. I'm Mike, by the way." I hesitated before replying. "Sarah." Mike started showing up more often. At first it felt like a coincidence. He'd wander into the Starbucks while I was working, order a black coffee, and strike up a conversation. "You look less sad today," he teased one afternoon. I smiled weakly. Trying to fake it better, I guess. "Nah, don't fake it. If you're having a bad day, let it out. Everyone needs a good cry sometimes." His words felt oddly comforting. Over the next few weeks, we started texting. He'd send funny memes or random thoughts like, "Ever notice how ducks always look like they're judging you?" It was silly, but it made me laugh. When he asked me out for dinner, I said yes without thinking twice. Mike and I fell into a routine quickly. Dinner dates turned into late-night drives where we talk about everything. His childhood, my struggles with anxiety, our favorite movies. One night after a long shift, he picked me up outside work. "You look exhausted," he said, holding the car door open for me. "Thanks," I said sarcastically, sliding in. "I mean it in a cute way," he replied, grinning. The banter was easy, effortless. For the first time in years, I felt like someone truly cared. The first red flag was subtle. "I don't think Erica likes you," Mike said one evening while we were watching TV at his place. "What? Why would you say that?" "She just gives off this vibe, like she's always talking down to you." I frowned. "I've never noticed that. Maybe you're too nice to see it." At the time, I brushed it off, but Mike's comments about the people in my life became more frequent. It wasn't long before Mike's concern turned into control. One night, while I was texting my coworker Brian about swapping shifts, Mike grabbed my phone. "Who's Brian?" he demanded. "A coworker," I said, startled. "Why are you texting him at 10 p.m.? "It's work," I explained. but he didn't look convinced. The next morning I found that Brian's number had been blocked. "I just don't think you need people like him in your life," Mike said casually over breakfast. Mike's moods became unpredictable. One evening he came home from work visibly angry. I tried to ask what was wrong, but he snapped at me. "Why can't you just leave me alone for 5 minutes?" I retreated to the bedroom, hurt but too afraid to push back. Later he apologized, saying he was just stressed. But the cycle repeated. His words became sharper, his criticism more frequent. "You'd be so much prettier if you worked out more," he said one day, eyeing me up and down. "Excuse me? I'm just saying. Don't get so sensitive." The day I decided to leave was a turning point. Mike had spent the entire evening berating me for not doing the dishes. By the time he stormed out to cool off, I was shaking with anger and fear. I grabbed my coworker Alyssa's phone during my shift the next day and called my mom. "Mom, I need to come home," I said, my voice trembling. Her response was immediate. "Pack your bags, sweetheart. You're always welcome here." The night I left, I waited until Mike was out. I packed as much as I could into my car and drove straight to my mom's house. When I arrived, she pulled me into a tight hug. "You're safe now," she whispered. A week later, Mike showed up at my work. I was on break wandering through the aisles of Target when I saw him. "Sarah," he called, his voice sharp. I froze. He looked furious. Without thinking, I turned and ran. My heart pounded as I darted through the store, eventually slipping through an employee-only door. "You okay?" a coworker asked, concerned. I nodded, breathless. It took time, therapy, and support from my family, but I started to heal. I reconnected with old friends and even went back to school. Looking back, I realized how much I'd lost and gained. Mike's manipulation taught me the importance of self-worth and boundaries. Wherever he is now, I just hope he's not hurting anyone else. It was the summer after college graduation, and life wasn't what I had envisioned. Armed with a psychology degree, I had imagined stepping into a fulfilling career where I could make a difference. Instead, I was back at my parents' house in the middle of my mid-sized city, trapped in the worst job I could imagine, working at Target. The store was the epitome of dysfunction. The managers were clueless, and most of my coworkers seemed unmotivated, the type of people who clocked in solely to clock out. I wasn't trying to be judgmental, but it was hard not to feel like I had hit rock bottom, especially when my dreams had been so big. My self-esteem was in tatters. Student debt loomed over me like a shadow. My days were spent in the monotony of stocking shelves and organizing aisles, dealing with rude customers. And to make matters worse, I had let myself go in the last year of college. Stress eating and neglecting exercise had taken a toll. I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore. That's when James entered the picture. James was one of the few people who actually spoke to me at work. He wasn't exactly my type. Goofy mustache, awkward gait, but he had a way of making me feel seen. One afternoon during a break, he joined me outside. "You don't look like you belong here," he said, lighting his cigarette. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, half laughing. "I mean, you seem smarter than the rest of us," he said with a shrug. I couldn't help but feel flattered, even though the compliment was backhanded. Over the next few weeks, James became friendlier. He'd drop by my section with snacks or random jokes. He wasn't the most polished guy, but when you're in a miserable place, even a little kindness stands out. Before I knew it, we were exchanging numbers and texting outside of work. At first, I thought James might be boyfriend material, though I wasn't thrilled about his mustache. "You'd look better without it," I teased one night over text. "Really? You think so?" "Trust me," I replied. It took weeks of convincing, but when he finally shaved it, I was surprised. Beneath the goofy facade was a genuinely handsome guy, but James never made a move, not even when I dropped obvious hints. After a while, I gave up. If he wasn't interested, why waste my time? That's when I downloaded Tinder. I met Alex on Tinder after scrolling through countless profiles of shirtless guys posing with fish. Alex was different, funny, charming, and respectful. We clicked instantly and started dating. Not long after, I updated my Facebook status to "in a relationship." That's when James started acting different. James's behavior shifted almost overnight. He reacted to my relationship status with an angry emoji, which I brushed off as immaturity. But then came the photos. James had always been a little flirty, but now he was sending me shirtless pictures that were way more revealing. "James, stop," I texted him one day after receiving yet another inappropriate photo. "I'm in a relationship. This isn't okay." "Sorry," he replied, force of habit. But it wasn't just the photos. Pens started disappearing from my section, only to turn up at James's. He'd follow me around the store, lingering too close. "You good?" one of my coworkers asked me during lunch. "Yeah, why?" "James stares at you a lot. Like, a lot." After 6 months at Target, I finally got a small raise, an extra $1 an hour. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. "I'm treating myself," I posted on Facebook. "New sheets from Target, here I come." That Friday, I headed to Target alone, excited to indulge in something nice for myself. The bedding aisle was quiet, and I took my time running my hands over the fabrics. I was lost in thought when I felt someone kiss my neck. I froze, my first thought being, "Alex? Did he surprise me?" But when I turned around, it wasn't Alex. It was James. "James, what the hell are you doing?" I snapped, my voice trembling. "Relax," he said with a grin. "You looked like you needed some attention." "Get away from me," I said, stepping back, but he moved closer. Before I could react, he pinned me against the shelf and kissed me again, his hands gripping my arms. "Stop!" I screamed, shoving him as hard as I could, but he was stronger than I expected. My scream caught the attention of a nearby shopper, a man in his 30s who came running into the aisle. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" the man shouted, pulling James off me and shoving him against the wall. James muttered something under his breath before bolting out of the store. "Are you okay?" the man asked, helping me to my feet. I think so," I stammered, still in shock. "Do you want me to call the police?" "No," I said quickly. "I just want to go home." I sat in my car for what felt like hours, replaying the incident in my head. I knew I should tell someone, my parents, Alex, maybe even HR, but the thought of reliving it was too overwhelming. The next day at work, James acted like nothing had happened. He still followed me around the store, still stared at me from across the aisles. "James, we need to talk," I said, pulling him aside during lunch. "What about?" he asked, feigning innocence. "You know what? Stay away from me. This isn't a joke." He smirked. "You didn't seem to mind at Target." I felt a surge of anger, but forced myself to stay calm. "If you don't leave me alone, I'll report you. To HR, to the police, everyone." It took weeks of avoiding James, but I finally mustered the courage to tell Alex what had happened. "I didn't want to ruin things between us," I explained, tears streaming down my face. "You didn't ruin anything," Alex said, holding me close. "This isn't your fault. We'll deal with this together." With Alex's support, I reported James to HR and filed a police report. James was fired a week later, and though I occasionally see him around town, he keeps his distance. I haven't been back to Target since that night. The thought of it still makes my stomach turn, but I'm slowly learning to reclaim my life, one step at a time. Jenny and I had always been inseparable. Since college, we'd been through thick and thin together. Now, both in our mid-30s, we were still living in downtown Philadelphia, roommates and best friends. Our lives were busy, and even though we were single, we loved our independence. We worked hard, had good-paying jobs, and had built a life that was ours. We didn't have kids or boyfriends, and honestly, we preferred it that way. But there was one thing we both shared a love for: shopping. Every Saturday night, without fail, we would go out, hit a few stores, grab a coffee, and just enjoy each other's company. It was our time. But then, the pandemic hit. Life came to a screeching halt. We both transitioned to working from home, and like everyone else, we spent our days inside, working and trying to adjust to this new way of life. It was a strange, isolating time. The days blurred together, and the apartment started feeling smaller by the minute. We both tried to stay positive, but there was no escaping the weight of it all. The thought of going out felt like a distant memory. We spent months indoors, constantly hearing about the virus and the threat it posed. Neither of us wanted to risk getting sick, but there was also this gnawing feeling of being trapped. I knew Jenny and I were both yearning for the days when we could just go out without a care in the world. So, when things started opening back up, we were cautiously optimistic. We waited a few weeks to see how things would unfold, but when the numbers seemed steady, we decided it was time for our first outing in ages. With our masks on and a little nervous energy, we ventured out to Target. It felt surreal but exhilarating at the same time. We wandered around the store, picking out clothes, some new perfume, and other little things. It was a release we hadn't had in months. The excitement of normal life slowly came back as we joked and laughed like we used to. But that excitement didn't last long. We were in the men's section, picking out some workout gear for Jenny's brother. He had been trying to impress a girl at the gym, so we were helping him with a birthday gift. I was bent down looking at a set of dumbbells when I felt someone standing a little too close. I looked up and saw him, probably in his mid-20s, with this cocky smile on his face. "Hey, what's your name?" he asked, his tone a little too forward for my taste. I shifted uncomfortably, giving him a polite but curt answer. "I'm just shopping with my friend, not interested," I said, trying to brush him off. But he didn't seem to get the hint. Instead, he moved even closer, asking about my job, where I lived, and what I did on weekends. It was all small talk, but it felt off. I glanced at Jenny, who looked equally uncomfortable, but we both tried to stay polite. Finally, he asked for my number. At that point, I had enough. "I don't have one," I said firmly, trying to end the conversation. But then he gave me this strange look, like I had offended him. "I saw you on your phone earlier," he said, his voice turning aggressive. "Give me your number. You're lying." I felt my stomach drop. What was this guy's problem? "I don't have one," I repeated, taking a step back. "Now please leave us alone." And then, just like that, he did something I never thought would happen. He reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and started yelling at me about how I was lying. "Give it back," I shouted, feeling panic rise. "Right now, or I'll call the police." He froze, his eyes flashing with something dark. And then, after a tense moment, he tossed the phone onto the floor before storming off. My heart was pounding in my chest, and Jenny looked just as shaken. "That was so weird," Jenny said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know," I said, picking up my phone and making sure it was working. I looked at Jenny. "Let's just finish up and get out of here." We tried to shake it off, continuing to browse through the racks, but my mind kept replaying what had just happened. I felt uneasy, like I was still being watched, and that's when Jenny tapped me on the shoulder. "Look over there," she said, her voice barely audible. I turned slowly, and my stomach dropped when I saw him. The same guy, standing on the other side of the store. But this time, something was different. His posture was odd. His hand was hidden inside his jacket, but it looked like his arm was moving in a way that made me feel sick. "Is he..." Jenny's voice trailed off. It wasn't obvious at first, but when you looked at him from the front, it became clear. He was doing something inappropriate, and his body was twitching in a way that made my blood run cold. "Let's go. Now," I whispered, grabbing Jenny's hand. We started walking quickly towards the front of the store, and I could feel his eyes on us. I found an employee nearby and quickly explained what had happened. His face hardened when he realized who we were talking about. Without a word, he walked over to the man, who immediately stopped what he was doing and left the store. "Thank you," I whispered to the employee, feeling both relief and anger bubbling inside me. We tried to finish up our shopping, but the excitement was gone. We went to check out, and the employee behind the register seemed to know exactly what had happened. "I'm really sorry about that," he said. "If you need anything, I can walk you to your car." We didn't hesitate. We agreed, grateful that someone was looking out for us. When we left the store, we saw him again. The same guy was standing outside watching us. My heart skipped a beat. Jenny and I exchanged worried glances. He started walking toward us, but the employee was right there, big and imposing. As soon as the guy saw him, he turned and ran, disappearing into the night. "Did he follow us here?" Jenny asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know, but I'm glad we had someone with us," I said. "I'm not sure what his deal was, but it's not worth finding out." The employee took out his phone, dialing something on it. "I'm calling the cops," he said, "just to make sure he doesn't come back." We stayed there for a moment, watching the parking lot before the employee told us it was safe to leave. We thanked him, and I even gave him a generous tip for looking out for us. On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Do you think we were just lucky?" Jenny asked, glancing at me from the passenger seat. "I don't know," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "But I'm glad we didn't find out the hard way." When we finally got home, I locked the door and sat on the couch, trying to calm down. The whole night had been a reminder of how unpredictable life can be, and how sometimes the only thing standing between you and something dangerous is a stranger willing to help. The next morning, I kept replaying everything in my mind. We didn't call the police when we should have, and I regretted that. But something inside me knew that the guy had been more than just a creep. There was something darker about him. I wasn't sure if I'd ever truly feel safe again when I walked into a store. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd never be so quick to let my guard down again. Sarah had always struggled with her mental health ever since middle school. Anxiety and depression were constant companions in her life, something that followed her through high school, college, and into adulthood. She never truly felt good enough or worthy of happiness. It was a constant battle just to get through the day. Her childhood had been far from perfect. Her parents, though loving, didn't fully understand the weight of the struggles she faced. Her friends, though well-meaning, never seemed to grasp the depth of her emotions. For Sarah, it often felt like she was carrying the world on her shoulders, a weight that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. By the time she started working at Starbucks inside Target, things hadn't improved much. The job was supposed to be a distraction, a way to keep her busy while she tried to figure out who she really was. But even at Starbucks, things were never as easy as they seemed on the surface. Sarah found herself constantly battling her thoughts and insecurities. She could fake a smile while handing out drinks to customers, but inside she felt hollow. She had no close friends, and the few people she interacted with at work didn't know the real her. All she wanted was to find someone who would understand her pain, someone who could help her navigate the darkness. That's when Mike came into the picture. It was a typical day at work when Sarah first met Mike. He was a regular customer at Starbucks, someone who seemed harmless at first. He had a smile that made her feel like she wasn't invisible, a kindness in his eyes that made her heart feel warm. One day, he struck up a conversation with her while she was making a drink. His voice was soft and reassuring, and it felt like for the first time in a long while, someone cared about her well-being. Mike seemed genuinely interested in her life, asking her questions and listening to her answers with undivided attention. It wasn't long before they exchanged numbers. The conversation started off light, casual, but soon, Mike began to open up about his own struggles. He shared stories about his past, his family, and how he had overcome challenges in his life. His vulnerability made Sarah feel closer to him, and she started to believe that maybe this was the connection she had been longing for. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt seen. At first, Mike's behavior seemed perfect. He was thoughtful, kind, and caring. He always seemed to say the right things, and every moment with him felt like it might be the start of something beautiful. But slowly, things started to change. Mike's compliments shifted into subtle criticisms. He began making small comments about Sarah's appearance, her weight, and the way she handled certain situations. It was never direct at first. It was always wrapped in a guise of concern or constructive criticism. "You should really work on losing a few pounds, Sarah. You'll feel better about yourself," Mike would say casually, as though it were nothing. Sarah would laugh it off, but deep down, it stung. It wasn't long before Mike's behavior became more controlling. He started to question her friendships, telling her that certain people didn't care about her, or that they were talking behind her back. At first, Sarah didn't want to believe it, but slowly, she began to withdraw from her friends, just as Mike suggested. "You don't need them, Sarah. I'm all you need," Mike would reassure her. And for a while, she believed him. As time passed, Sarah found herself sinking deeper into a world of isolation and self-doubt. Mike's criticisms became more frequent, and his manipulation more obvious. He started to control where she went, what she wore, and even who she could talk to. The person who had once made her feel special now seemed to relish in breaking her down. Sarah began to question her own worth, believing that maybe Mike was right. Maybe she wasn't good enough. She could feel herself changing, becoming someone she didn't recognize. The person who had once been independent and strong was now a shell of herself. Mike would make comments like, "You're lucky I'm with you, Sarah. No one else would want you." And the worst part was, she started to believe him. She began to feel trapped in a relationship that was suffocating her, but she didn't know how to get out. The turning point came one day when Mike showed up at her work, unannounced. He stood there watching her as she worked behind the counter. Sarah felt her stomach drop as soon as she saw him, and panic began to set in. She had been trying to distance herself from him, but he wasn't letting her go that easily. "Why are you avoiding me, Sarah?" Mike demanded, his voice cold and angry. "I know what you're doing. You think you can just cut me out of your life like this?" Sarah could feel her heart racing. She wanted to escape, but she didn't know how. She couldn't let him control her anymore, but the fear of his reaction paralyzed her. In that moment, she realized that if she didn't act now, she might never be able to escape. With the help of a co-worker, Sarah managed to reach out to her mother. She told her what was happening, and her mother immediately offered her a place to stay. It was a lifeline Sarah had been desperately waiting for. That night, while Mike was out, Sarah gathered her things and quietly left his apartment. She didn't say goodbye. She knew that if she tried to explain, Mike would convince her to stay, and she couldn't let that happen. When Mike showed up at Starbucks a few days later, he was angry. He tried to manipulate Sarah into talking to him again, but she was done. She ignored his pleas and stayed firm in her decision. The last time Sarah saw Mike was at Target. It was during one of her breaks at work. As she was walking through the aisles, she saw him staring at her through the glass near the Starbucks counter. His eyes were filled with rage, and it was clear that he wasn't going to let her go easily. Her heart raced as she saw him move toward her, his footsteps quick and angry. Without thinking, Sarah turned and ran. She could hear him shouting her name, but she didn't stop. Her only goal was to get away. She rushed through the employee door and locked it behind her. A fellow Target employee asked if she was okay, but she didn't want to make a scene. She said she just needed a moment to breathe. After a few tense minutes, Mike was gone, and Sarah knew that this was the end. She had finally broken free. It wasn't easy for Sarah to heal. She spent time with her mother, rebuilding her self-esteem and working through the emotional scars Mike had left on her. Slowly, she began to reclaim her life. She went back to therapy, focused on her career, and started reconnecting with the people who truly cared about her. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but Sarah learned to value herself again. She learned that she didn't need someone else to define her worth. After Sarah left Mike, the days that followed felt surreal. There was a mixture of relief and lingering fear. She had escaped, yes, but the emotional scars remained. Mike's words still echoed in her mind, and there were times when she doubted her own worth. But deep down, Sarah knew she had made the right decision. Her mother's house became her safe haven. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt some semblance of peace. Her mom, who had always supported her, offered her love without question, never once asking Sarah why it took so long to leave. It was unconditional support, something Sarah had never fully experienced before in her adult life. Sarah started attending therapy again, something she hadn't done in years. At first, the sessions were difficult. She had so many emotions bottled up inside, and it felt overwhelming to process it all. But over time, she learned to give herself grace. She learned that the abusive behavior wasn't her fault, that she wasn't to blame for how Mike treated her. She began to rebuild the self-worth that had been shattered for so long. One of the most powerful steps Sarah took was reconnecting with friends she had lost touch with during her relationship with Mike. At first, she was hesitant. Would they still want her around after so much time apart? But the friends who truly cared welcomed her with open arms, understanding her absence, and showing her that true friendship was built on trust and compassion. As months passed, Sarah began to reclaim her independence. She started focusing more on her work at Starbucks, finding joy in the small moments of connection with customers and colleagues. She even began to rediscover some of the hobbies and passions she had put aside during her relationship with Mike. The process wasn't linear, and there were still days when Sarah felt anxious or lost. But she had learned to cope with her emotions in healthier ways. She took long walks, practiced mindfulness, and surrounded herself with people who made her feel safe and valued. And then one day, she realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living again. She met new people, made new friends, and for the first time in years, she could see a future for herself. A future that wasn't defined by someone else's control, but by her own strength and choices. One afternoon, while walking through a park near her mother's house, Sarah saw a couple walking hand in hand. A wave of sadness passed over her, but it wasn't the same kind of despair she had once felt. It was a bittersweet reminder of the life she had lost, but also of the life she was now building. As she sat on a bench, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about how far she had come, how strong she had become. She thought about Mike, not with anger or hatred, but with a sense of closure. She had escaped his grasp, and though he had once tried to break her, he had failed. In that moment, Sarah understood something important. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She was whole on her own, and the future was hers to create. Sarah was no longer a prisoner of her past. She was free. She had endured the pain, but she had survived. And in surviving, she had become stronger than she had ever thought possible. Looking ahead, Sarah knew there would be challenges. Life was never perfect, and healing was a process. But she was no longer afraid. She had the strength to face whatever came her way. She had learned to trust herself again, to believe that she was worthy of happiness and love, not from someone else, but from within herself. With every step forward, Sarah was reclaiming her life piece by piece. And as she walked away from the park that day, she couldn't help but smile. There was a light ahead, and she was ready to embrace it.